Alright, today we will be matchmaking every fighter after UFC 327. I'm not going to waste any time, and to get this started, we're going to be starting with Francisco Prado. And man, Francisco Prado should probably be matched up with the regional scene. I think that'd be a good change of pace for him. He's just struggled at welterweight, and definitely not a bad fighter, but I think he needs some time to develop, and I think going back on the regional scene would be a good change of pace for him. For Charles Radke, I think giving him a good prospect like Jacoby Smith would be interesting. Jacoby Smith is 12-0 and 3-0 in the UFC with 3 finishes, but hasn't beat anybody too impressive, so it'd be a good step up and a good test for both fighters, honestly. Jacoby Smith also got some hate recently for his last performance, with people saying he kept punching after the ref tried to jump in and stop the fight, so I could see Charles Radke talking some shit in the press conference and making it fun, so I think that's a good next fight. Next fighter is Kelvin Gastelum, and he didn't look bad, but I don't really know what to do with him after this. He's still capable of fun fights, and I think maybe you just put him in there with Tresean Gore. Gore seemed locked in after his last win and looked really improved, so it'd be another solid test for him without throwing him up too high, and I think it'd be a good step down for Gastelum as well. Vicente Luque looked great in this fight. He knocked Kelvin, locked up the submission, and maybe 185 could bring some life back into him. But at the same time, I don't want to rush him fast at all, and I think something simple like Dusko Todorovic would be a smart matchup for him. Something simple like that, nothing too crazy, and I think that'd be a good matchup on both sides. Man, I think if Michael Johnson has one more in him versus Chris Padilla would be an awesome fight. Padilla's pressure and aggressive striking mixed with Johnson's footwork and slickness would make for an entertaining fight for sure. And for Mikel Medeiros, I think another evaluation type matchup for him would make sense, and I think Nicholas Mata makes sense and is a good matchup for him. Mata is 3-3 in the UFC and is a good overall fighter. His wins aren't that impressive, but he's only lost to solid fighters like Jim Miller, Manuel Torres, and Nazim Sadikov, so this is a good test for Medeiros for sure. You could really go a lot of different ways with Tatiana Suarez. She could get the next shot versus Dern, or Weili Zhang could be coming back down and get the immediate title shot back, which, if that's the case, then I think Jillian Robertson or Verna Jandiroba would both be good matchups. Either one really, but I'd probably lean Verna Jandiroba. For Lupi Godinez, I think a little bit of a reset fight could be good for her, and I think Alexia Tainara, who is 14-1, and 3-0 in the UFC, coming off a win versus Bruna Brazil, is a pretty good matchup for her. It's a bit of a fast track for Tainara, but she's looked good out there and deserves a step up. And for Godinez, it's a winnable fight against a less experienced opponent that you could take some hype from for sure, so I think it makes sense for both fighters. Alright, I think I cooked for these next two, I ain't gonna lie, and for Esteban Ribovic, he got wrestle-fucked. That was no fun for him, so let's book him an exciting bounce-back fight. Okay, how about Drew Dober? All I know is somebody's getting knocked out, so I think that'd be a fun fight, and that's the pick for Ribovic. And man, for Gamrot, I think a banger matchup would be him versus Renato Moicano. The timelines match up pretty perfectly. Moicano's coming off that impressive win over Chris Duncan, and I think this fight would be very high level. Both of these guys have improved greatly in their striking over the last couple fights and are both top tier on the ground, so I think it'd be a firework fight for sure, and definitely a really fun matchup. Next fight, we got Randy Brown, and Randy Brown, man, I think with him being 1-3 in his last 4, we just feed him to an up-and-comer, which could result in an easy win or a bit of an embarrassing loss, but I think you go Randy Brown versus Suk Yun Ko. Ko is 13-2 overall and now 2-0 in the UFC with unanimous wins over Oban Elliott and Phil Rowe, so it's definitely a good step-up test for Ko and a good potential turnaround fight for Randy Brown. And the next fight, we got Kevin Holland, and for Kevin Holland, I think he should go against the loser of Joel Alvarez versus Yaroslav Amosov, which is coming up May 9th on UFC 328. If it's Alvarez, it's going to be a great scrap. Alvarez throws hands, and Kevin Holland will probably try to be attacking on the outside at range. And if it's Amosov, it's going to be another tough grappling test for Kevin Holland, which, if he wins, would be huge for him. But if he loses, wouldn't be that shocking. But hey, it'd be a good win for Amosov, so I guess that'd be something. For Patricio Pitbull, man, give him like Nathaniel Wood. If Pitbull wins, he reestablishes himself as a top 25-ish guy at featherweight and a good potential gatekeeper. And if he loses, maybe we could just hang it up. Ain't no need for us to see Patricio Pitbull end his career on a 1-6 run in the UFC or some shit, so. And if Nathaniel Wood wins, that's a big name for his resume. Even if Pitbull isn't the same Pitbull, it would still push him up that featherweight ladder. Matchmaking for Aaron Pico is interesting. Part of me is like, fuck it, give him Yair, or give him the loser of Zalal versus Sterling, or the loser of Melquizael Costa versus Arnold Allen. Like, any of those are really fun fights, but the other part of me is like, okay, this guy is still only 29, 2 fights in the UFC. Let's give him someone like David Onama, or Bryce Mitchell, or Jose Delgado. But I don't think the UFC would make those kind of fights with Pitbull, and I think he's probably going to get thrown right back into deep water. But again, if it was me, I think I'd go David Onama, who's coming off a knockout loss to Steve Garcia, who's now fighting Diego Lopez on the White House card. But he was on a 4-fight win streak before that, and it's a fight versus a top 25-ish or so featherweight, and a good opportunity to build more hype behind him. But, if I didn't go that route, again, all of these are super fun fights to make. Man, Cub Swanson will be getting a nice matchup with retirement. A great career for Cub Swanson and a great way to go out. Bro, for Nate Landwehr, just give him Andre Philly. Give him one last paycheck. I think Philly knocks him out, but I think it'd be a fun fight at least. And then Landwehr can just ride off into the sunset. Man, fuck this fight. I don't even want to matchmake these fuckers. Both of these guys can go ahead and be banished to bare knuckle. Being for real, I guess for Johnny Walker, I think you can give him either Dustin Jacoby or Jimmy Crute. Jacoby is on a 3-fight knockout streak, and Crute has won 2 in a row by knockout. It's definitely a step down for Johnny Walker, but both are fun, entertaining fighters and should bring the fight to Walker, which I guess is apparently needed now. For Dominic Reyes, it's like, where do we even go from here? You gotta fight somebody near that top 10 range, I guess, but he really doesn't deserve that. He was on a nice run recently, but he didn't beat anybody too impressive. Got knocked out by Carlos Olberg, and his last performance sucked. So I think you could go ahead and do something like Ion Cutelaba or Modestas Bukauskas, which would hopefully both be fun and competitive fights. Or if Bogdan Goskov loses to Jan Blachowicz, I guess you could just feed Reyes to him also. Man, oh man, oh man. I already said it in my reaction video, and I'm sure you've heard it from like 100 other people at this point already. But if you missed this fight, please go watch it. Like, honestly, stop the video and just go watch that fight at this point. It was a generational heavyweight fight. Generational just fight in general. And insane pace at heavyweight. Both guys got hurt. Just an awesome fight. My Curtis Blades stock in this loss honestly went up more than it did in his win versus Kuniev. Blades is still definitely a top heavyweight, but there's not a lot of good fresh matchups at the top for him right now, so I think for now, take some time off, recover, but a good fun next fight for him could be Vitor Petrino. It's a big jump up for Petrino, but Blades is 2-3 in his last 5 and I think deserves a winnable matchup. And for Josh Hokett, we obviously already know that him and Derek Lewis are scheduled for that White House card, and I don't like that matchup. You take a big risk in fast-tracking Hokett against the number 5 heavyweight contender. He wins, and now you say, let's rush him back in against a guy who's ranked at number 10 and coming off a loss. I think if Hokett is more patient and uses his wrestling more, that he'll get the win. But in the off chance Derek Lewis KOs him, then what? Hokett's hype is slashed for a Derek Lewis, my balls are sweaty, post-fight speech on the White House card. I don't know, man. I really just don't get it. But I don't want people to think I don't think it's a good fight. Like, it's a good fight. It just doesn't make sense. If it were up to me, I'd be doing Josh Hokett versus the loser of Volkov versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. That makes much more sense to me, but hey, what do I know? Hokett has also talked some shit about Waldo before and has called him out, I think, before as well, so it makes sense. Next fighter to matchmake for is Azamat Murzakanov, and coming off his loss to Paulo, I think a great but very tough bounce-back fight would be versus Khalil Roundtree. It would be a very high-level, exciting, striking-based fight, and somebody's getting knocked out. And onto Paulo Costa, I think honestly the kind of clear fight to make, at least for me, is versus Yuri Prochazka. Paulo just knocked out a guy who was 16-0, 6-0 in the UFC with 5 knockouts. So to me, he's immediately in a top contender spot, and he deserves a top contender fight. And who else besides the guy who just fought for the belt? If not Yuri, I think you could make a more boring option like Volkan Ozdemir, but we don't really need that, you know? Oh man, matchmaking for these last two guys is a bit of a smack in the face for sure, but with Yuri, I already mentioned the Paolo option, which I think is a lot of fun, and I think it makes a lot of sense as well. But if not Paolo, I think another interesting matchup for Yuri would be Magomed Ankalaev. Magomed is coming off getting whooped by Alex Pereira, but still deserves a top 5 matchup in his return. Yuri won't have to worry about the power in this one at least, as I think Magomed would most likely try and rely on his wrestling and clinch work. I think it's a tough matchup for Magomed, but I also think he has the fight IQ advantage, and if Yuri does some stupid stuff, he could definitely capitalize. Sadly, we will most likely be waiting a while to see Olberg defend his belt, and I think we will be getting an interim in the meantime, which could end up being Bogdan Goskov, it could be Paulo Costa, who knows, but trying to plan ahead a little bit is hard. You know, it's hard to see any real contenders right now standing out for Olberg. I think there's a world where Yuri could eventually get a rematch, honestly. I think there's a world where Paulo could get a quick shot as well. So maybe the winner of Yuri versus Paulo fights Olberg if they make that fight. And besides those two, the only real person with a chance to me is Bogdan Goskov. I know some people think Magomed should get a shot at the interim belt, but I just can't warrant a guy getting knocked out in the first round and then getting a interim title shot immediately after. It's crazy how light heavyweight went from looking loaded to kind of stale in a matter of a couple months. Alright man, so that's what I'm thinking in terms of who the fighters from UFC 327 should be fighting next. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I cooked, or let me know if you think that shit was ass. Either way, let me know, and y'all have a good one. I'll catch y'all in the next one.